Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 83 of the Citrix Session. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm talking a little low here. I've got, and not be doing a whole lot of talking. I'm at the airport and recording a podcast. So I'm going to rely on Bill and Aayush to walk us through this. Bill, how's it going?
Going well, Andy, and you?
It's going good. Going to be a busy week. Excited to get out and see some more clients this week.
Very good.
And we've got Aayush Agarwal. Aayush, did I say that last name properly?
Yes, that's correct, Andy. Thank you so much for having me over.
And the topic for today is a blog you wrote recently. Title of it's Enhanced ICA File Security on Citrix Workspace app for Windows. And I'll use that as a moment for me to bring up when you talk workspace at Citrix, you really got to make sure you're talking, workspace, workspace service, workspace app for Windows, app for Mac, app for Linux, lots of things branded workspace, but specifically here, we're talking about the workspace app for Windows. I've had a couple interesting moments. I enabled app protection on my device and my company, XenTegra. We manage app protection and turn it on for things. And I go to, and tell me this is how it's supposed to work, right? So I'm doing a team session and I go to share my screen, but I've got the workspace app up and loaded. No actual published apps at the moment, but the workspace app up and loaded, and they can't see my screen. That's by design, right?
Yes, that is correct. That is by design, and that is what app protection's value internally is, right? I mean, app protection essentially blocks any kind of screen captures or screen sharing, so that any kind of confidential information that, or any data that requires to be protected is really hidden from any kind of screen grabs or screen sharing tools. So that's on point. Of course, the other value that app protection also brings with it is the anti-key logging functionality. So anytime you're trying to there's any malware which is trying to capture your keystrokes, it will really be blocked. So yeah.
So I think it caught me off guard the first time though, because I didn't expect it to, without an app being currently accessed. I didn't expect it to do that, but I mean, it's really all about the workspace app doing its security things all the time, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I just took a, never mind. I'll have to share with you, but well, let's jump into your blog here. So what we're talking about here is the enhanced security of the workspace app. You want to kind of walk us into the intro here that you gave us and why it's important that you wrote this blog?
Sure, Andy. I'd be happy to do that. And if you look at Citrix, since times immemorial, of course, security has been our focus. And one of the key value additions that Citrix provide in the whole virtualization environment is really security. And the current way that the whole ICA file really works, and the way we actually launch out a virtual app or a virtual desktop is pretty much wherein we download an ICA file and we pretty much launch that ICA file using Citrix Workspace app.
Now, and just real quick for our listeners, that's whether you use the Workspace app to get to the apps or whether you use a browser, and the default behavior is download the ICA file and use the local app to launch, right, the session.
Absolutely. So whether you're using a browser or you're using the Workspace app, essentially we download the ICA file, and then it is our HDX engine which really launches that ICA file, and you have your virtual app or virtual desktop up and running. And
well, real quick on that topic, because I know we have listeners that get confused by this all the time. If in fact you launch the app or desktop session inside the browser window itself, that's the HTML5 receiver, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about using the full-blown Workspace app for Windows, right?
Yes, the complete native experience, and that's pretty much what we are talking about in this case. So traditionally, yeah.
So I do want to ask you a question, because I think you're going to give an amazing answer for this. Does that process, say in the use of like RDP, Has that always been kind of vulnerable and insecure in the world of RDP, and Citrix has taken yours to another level? Are all the concerns that are out there around, RDP vulnerabilities, are those real?
To an extent, yes, Andy. I would say that the ICA files were there. We would store ICA files on the disk. So when you actually download the ICA file, whether you're accessing the virtual app or desktop via the browser or via the Workspace app, we would essentially download the ICA file onto the disk of your system. And of course, this has been the model since since the product is live and up, and this has also been the preferred approach by many other virtualization vendors. But I think what we were really keen on is to really listen to our customers and understand from their point of view what really encompasses a more secure environment, really, right? And that's where we understand that while it's okay to have the ICA file on the disk, it's not ideal. It's not ideal because you can have anybody kind of pick up that ICA file, edit a few entries, or even take that to another system and maybe even possibly launch it. And while there are enough and more use cases as well for this behavior, we realize that security is of top-notch importance to any of our enterprises. And that is where we took a very conscious call. And in fact, some of our large customers have requested for this, that the ICA file actually be stored in the system memory and not on the disk. And what this will actually do is it will make the ICA file completely in memory, so that you cannot just access the file standalone and even like look into the contents of the ICA file as such.
So this is the tech preview for this, right? And so it's not by default yet, but that's where you guys plan to head with the technology?
That is correct. So at this point of time, we have launched this capability as a technology preview, and we're welcoming feedback. We're trying to get more hands on this to test it, and we're requesting for feedback on this. And based on all the feedback, in the subsequent releases, we will make this the default behavior, of course.
All right, so I'm going to pause you there because I know Bill's going to have some comments or some questions, or both. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Aayush, I wanted to just make the point that when in the old ICA file there, the ability to move it from system to system obviously could present a problem, but there is, or was, if I'm correct, a ticketing mechanism that would help mitigate that. Does that ticketing mechanism exist still in the ICA file, or the ICA memory file, I guess is the better way of putting it?
Yes, that will continue to exist. Yes, there is no real change in the way the whole architecture is really working out or panned out. But as you rightly pointed out, the whole ICA file, ticketing mechanism will continue to exist.
Okay, good.
All right, Bill, if you're hearing this and you're an old school Citrix troubleshooter guy, what's your concern?
I can't see the ICA file if I need to figure out why the connection's not happening.
Got it. All right. So I guess usually it's a trade-off, of course, but
right.
We have made sure that the ICA file can still be kind of, the connections can still be debugged or, troubleshooted via the CDF traces. Of course, you do not have full control on the ICA file and look at the contents of the ICA file, but CDF tracing is the mechanism that you can continue to use, and troubleshooting should still work as is for most administrators.
Good.
So that's interesting, because it sounds like you guys are saying, look, we're going to change this, make it more secure. We're not going to give you a quick, easy hack to make it go back the other way, because if you do, then people will. And next thing you know, it'd be like the Windows firewall, and people just turn it off because they did it once and left it off.
Exactly.
Okay, so Aayush, what are these registry keys that you've called out here in the article?
Yeah, so essentially, Andy, like we were speaking, the feature or the capability is turned off by default right now because it is just a tech preview. So these are registry keys, and these are really settings that can help you enable that feature so that you can try out how the whole ICA file in memory works in your environment, and give us feedback, of course. And moving forward, when we actually call this feature for general availability, all of these registry keys will not be required.
Aayush, are you guys doing anything to incentivize your buddies out there, your sysadmins, your Citrix admins out there to give this a shot, or is it just people wanting to play a role in helping to move the product forward?
Yes, in fact, we're encouraging a lot of the system administrators to really test this out and try this out. We, in fact, even internally, we run a very heavy dog fooding program. And within Citrix, we have this capability enabled on all our systems. And that's something that we're thoroughly testing, because this is really the core of the product. And we do not really want to break this flow. We do not really want to tamper that much with ICA files that it really stops working for some of our large enterprises. So yeah, this is something that we're actually requesting for a lot of feedback on. We're giving in a lot of tech previews and controls to administrators to try this out. Another thing that you were kind of hinting at, and I'd like to also point out, is that even though the behavior by default will be that the ICA file will be stored in memory, but there could be finer controls that system administrators would like. So, for example, they might really want to block the download of ICA file from the browser, and there is this capability wherein you can actually double click on the ICA file and actually launch a session, which would mean that the ICA file in that case ends up on the disk and not in the system memory. And we do have a capability in the form of a group policy. And more recently, we launched the global app config service from Citrix. And we do have a setting which is provided even as part of the global app config service, wherein we're providing system administrators more finer control on what the behavior can be. So for instance, as a system administrator, you can just block out the download and launching of sessions by double clicking the ICA file as such. So there are several controls, both in the form of a GPO policy as well as from the global app config service that you can actually kind of utilize to disable this behavior. We're also providing setting in Workspace platform itself. And that's something which also disallows ICA file downloads to the local disk. So there are various system level controls which we are providing to administrators. They can use these controls, gain finer control on the ICA file downloads itself, and of course, ensure that their environments are even more secure.
I was just having the exact feeling that you brought out there. The idea that this is something that's so near and dear to the Citrix world, and has been for a long time, around the ICA launch file. It's a pretty big change, and as you said, you guys are going to go slow. What would you have, if you can, and maybe you can't, what would you estimate would be the time where this becomes the default behavior? Or is it 6 months out, 12 months out? Or is there any type of defined timeline on that?
So we're essentially going to decide when this feature goes generally available based on the feedback we get. So far, the feedback is quite positive, I must tell you that. And it sounds like we might be able to, make this capability GA pretty soon, maybe in the next 2 to 3 months. That's the time frame that we're looking at. But of course, this could change subject to the feedback we get, because sometimes we also want our system administrators and large customers to be able to test this for an extended period of time, test it at scale, and then kind of take this final decision, because the last thing we want to do is to really break any of the launches for our customers. So far so good. Looks positive. We should be out there pretty soon. But yeah, I would kind of still rely on feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet you're still going to find a large enterprise or two out there that has like kind of the old program neighborhood, not agent, but program neighborhood concept where it actually uses that, downloads a file, use some type of script that some guy wrote way back when, and actually launches it. I assume you guys have, through evolution, broken those models, but I was shocked about probably about 8 years ago now, watching a really large healthcare organization, and that's what they were doing still, and I couldn't believe it, but they were literally downloading hard-coded ICA files and launching from there. Bill, you seen something like that before?
Yeah, I've seen that before. The other thing I've seen is as you might recall, Andy, and Aayush, I'm sure you too, that there is, or used to be, a default ICA file that you could make changes to that would modify the behavior, maybe the screen size, things of that nature, that would modify the behavior that would occur when the app was launched. I don't know if that goes away in this model, whether there's still a default ICA policy or file. A lot of that's been moved to the policy engine, but there are customers that do still modify that file to change the overall behavior of application launch. It's rare, but I do see it every once in a while.
Well, Aayush, I think you hit on it. You guys are looking for feedback, but before we started to hit the record button, you had mentioned several other things that you guys have come out with recently in tech preview that you wanted to kind of highlight as well, while that we had the attention of our listeners.
Sure, Andy. I think it's really the time when we're going really fast with a lot of features on the Workspace app for Windows. And there were a few other capabilities that we actually announced as tech preview. And in general, you'll see this model more and more going forward, that we call out a feature as tech preview. We give our customers and partners an opportunity to really try out the feature, give us good enough feedback, and then kind of proceed with actually calling out the feature as GA. And one of the capabilities, I must say, that we very recently called out as tech preview was the inactivity timeout for Citrix Workspace. So I know we'd like to stress the difference between Storefront and the Citrix Workspace platform in here. And one of the differences that we really see today is that when customers configured Citrix Storefront, they could actually set up a time limit which said that if a user is idle or inactive for a specified duration of time period, just log out that user from the Citrix Workspace app. And this capability was unavailable with the Citrix Workspace platform, which is our cloud platform. And with the recent release that we went live with, that is Workspace app for Windows 2107, we've actually gone ahead with a technology preview of the inactivity timeout for Workspace. And this is where—
Can I pause you on that real quick, just to make sure I understand what you're talking about? So we've had inactivity timeouts for, sessions that then turn around and turn off to, get disconnected and then turn to a log off. What you're saying here is the ability to inactivity the workspace and force it to re-authenticate. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that is correct, Andy.
Yeah, getting that across the board for all platforms, Windows, Linux, Mac, that would be awesome.
Yes, agreed. So we're launching a tech preview for Windows at this point of time, wherein the users automatically get signed out, after a specified period of inactivity. And this again aligns with the whole security motion that we started off this conversation with, Andy, that, we'd like to provide more security controls to our administrators. We'd like to make sure that the software itself is more inherently secure. And this is another step in that direction as well.
And so Aayush, that would be the case whether they were using Storefront, gateway service, all the above?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Hey, Bill, I can see you smiling. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's I was going to say, does it include web interface? But Yeah, no, no, that's a really good feature to have in there. That'd be awesome. That's going to be awesome when it comes out. I look forward to testing that out, Aayush. I did have a question. I wanted to go back to the blog for a second, if I can. In the blog, it mentions that you can block ICA launch files using the global app config service. That's the service where you can predefine like an email address domain for the user to automatically configure or easily configure the Workspace app, right?
That is correct. Yes.
So are you saying here that when they do that, this policy can come down from the config service at the same time to block direct launches?
Yes, that is correct, Bill. And
Wow, good.
what that would also mean is that in the past with group policies and GPOs, you could only really apply policies to systems that were managed by the administrator. But what Global App Config Service really provides capability to be able to apply policies even for BYOD devices or
Yeah,
non-domain join.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, is that's huge, and to enable the ability for us to affect those BYO devices that aren't members of the domain and can't get GPOs. That's always been kind of the tough thing to address when you're dealing with in the BYO space, and be able to custom configure, automatically configure some of these settings. So that's a real solid piece there.
Yeah, agreed, fully agreed.
Let's see. The other thing you've got here is disallowing file downloads. You already talked about that. This says Workspace for web by running PowerShell commands. So you'd have to run PowerShell commands on the endpoint. Is that right? Or is that somewhere else?
Yeah, this is really on the Workspace platform itself. So you can really use the PowerShell commands and really configure the policies in Workspace itself.
Okay, I see. So in the Workspace service?
Yes, in the Workspace service.
Okay,
that's correct.
Good.
Hey, Aayush, any other exciting announcements that you'd want to convey here?
Yeah, sure, Andy. I think there were a bunch of other technology previews that we must kind of highlight. So I think there's been this long-standing request from the field and a lot of our users that, hey, I'd like to be able to authenticate to Citrix Workspace app using something like a Windows Hello, or maybe more modern authentication mechanisms like FIDO2-based authentication mechanisms. It could be with like a YubiKey or any of the authentication mechanisms which support the FIDO2 protocol. And we're happy to announce a recent tech preview for the capability to authenticate to Citrix Workspace app using Windows Hello and FIDO2 based authentication mechanisms. And this is now really in tech preview. And that's something which I personally find very exciting about, because we personally use YubiKeys internally, and I think now I'd be glad to just use the Workspace app, be able to authenticate to it with my YubiKey and just go forward.
That's interesting timing. I literally opened a ticket with my own internal help desk this week asking if I could use Windows Hello to authenticate the Citrix Workspace app for Windows.
Yep.
All right. Anything, Bill, any questions, comments on that one? Well, before you do that, I have a question on that one. How would that work in a world where maybe it's not a domain joined machine or a domain member?
Yeah, at this point of time, I think it really requires a domain joined machine. But yeah, I mean, as Microsoft itself, the whole landscape matures, we can certainly look at how we would better integrate the whole Windows Hello mechanism with our authentication mechanisms to Workspace in general. But at this point, they do require the domain joined machines.
Bill, any comments on that? No, I kind of figured. I had kind of a similar question, was what domain status was needed for Windows Hello, and the YubiKey. I think I've gotten a request for that recently, Aayush, and that's the USB key, correct? If I recall.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've gotten a request from a customer that was using that wanted to integrate that. We haven't gotten to it yet, but this will be interesting to know. Is there a central place, to your knowledge, on the Citrix website or the blog site where we can see the list of what's in tech preview currently?
Yes. So basically our docs where we list the what's new for every release do kind of call out, what the tech previews that are actually running right now are. So if you just look at about this release page in our product documentation, you should be able to find just pretty much about all the tech previews running out there, and even details on how to configure those tech previews, how to provide feedback on those tech previews, and just about all the details in there.
All right, great. Thank you.
Well, Aayush, any other announcements that you'd want to cover while we got listeners and their attention?
Sure. One other announcement, which I'm personally very excited about, and I know that possibly a lot of system administrators are listening into this podcast as well, is that we now have a formal Citrix Workspace app beta program. And what this means is really that, just within the Citrix Workspace app itself, you could choose to stick on to a beta program, and you would get access to early access releases from Citrix, even before we call out GA for a workspace app. So you would automatically be updated to the recent betas that we roll out, and these provide you the capability to test early, to actually provide feedback again to Citrix, and just look at what's coming, and get a sense of what changes are coming into the workspace app itself. So of course, you can automatically update to each of these beta builds. And it's quite an exciting program. We've been rolling this out internally to get a lot of feedback, and it has worked quite well for us. And that's where we thought that, we'd like to roll this out to our customers as well. And there is this whole capability where you can actually try out new features and new changes even before the product is released for general availability.
No, that's great. As you know, and some of our listeners know, I'm a big fan of like T-shirts and things. Any idea about maybe something like a T-shirt or hat or something that says, "Hey, I'm part of the Citrix Beta program"? I know that sounds a little cheesy and trivial, but people love their T-shirts.
Yes, definitely, Andy. I think that's a great idea. I'm going to take this back to my team, and I think that's a great way to encourage more people to really sign up for our beta program. But that's certainly one program that I'm super excited about.
Great. Well, I guess with that, we'll go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry.
I said, yeah, very good.
So I guess with that, guys, we'll start to wrap it up. Bill, any additional questions, comments, things you want our listeners to know?
No, not at this point. I think I'm good. Thank you, Aayush.
Great. Thank you, Andy and Bill. I think it was great talking to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when do you expect to have the next official release out so we can have you back on?
Very soon, I'd say, in the next month or so for sure.
Okay. Yeah, development never sleeps, huh?
Yes, development never sleeps. That's right.
All right, guys. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you.